Stuart Friedman, great to have you here.
Good to be here, Michael.
Where are you talking from now? Your home?
Yes, I'm talking to you from Redwood City.
Redwood City, wonderful. I'm in Southern California, so also spending quarantine here at home. How has it been working for you from home for the past 3 or 4 weeks?
Well,
Or
I've
is that
been
actually the
working.
norm
I've
for
been
you?
working out of my own office, whether it be home or every Starbucks from here into the other side of the world for the past 15 years, and so, or out of my clients' offices. So, being out on my own is nothing new.
All right, so maybe let's just start. Give maybe a tip or two to people that are now having to struggle to work from home in an environment that has a lot of distraction, and it's not easy to just sit in the living room and try to get some work done.
Right. It's really fascinating. One of the things that I've found in the 15 years or so that I've been doing this is there are so many aspects of trust, alignment, and miscommunication that just about every company on the planet has,
Yeah,
regardless of their makeup. And those things are only exasperate. Sorry, uh, have only gotten worse uh, due to the pandemic. And they're all, yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. Let's hope mispronunciating a word is not an early symptom to coronavirus.
It has the news has been saying a lot of things it hasn't said yet this yet.
Right. But there is so much that is outside of our normal considerations and how to interact with people, even when we've had wide bandwidth communication channels. In other words, meeting with people.
Yep.
But now we really lose all that subtlety and nuance, nonverbal. And so if there had been problems in the past with miscommunications or building trust, they're just going to get a lot worse now. And so people need to be aware of these things and very much on top of them.
Okay, so you're already talking about trust and communication methods, and so you're a culture expert, right? That's how I got to know you over about 5-6 years ago. Talk to me a little bit about what does it mean to be sort of a culture expert and to understand how different cultures communicate, work together, respect each other, etc.
It's interesting because as you mentioned, I started talking trust and you're back to culture. It's amazing how many companies will say to me, thanks, but we don't have any cultural issues here. I hear that more times than you would believe. In fact, I hear that a lot from Israeli companies that are based in the US. And I'll give you a great Israeli company story. I was introduced to a CEO here domestically of an Israeli management team, although the company's based here in the US. And I met with the CEO on the recommendation of a former colleague and client, saying that the CEO had a very high turnover in his company and maybe I could help him work through that. So I met with the CEO, and after I felt like we built a pretty good dialogue, I said, and by the way, it's altogether possible that part of the conflict that your employees are experiencing are the way you address issues with them and the way you uh, bring up confrontations and the style of a discussion. To which the CEO said to me, Stuart, that's simply not true. I've been in the country for 25 years, and as far as I can tell, I'm no different than all the other CEOs. Only that's not the way he said it to me. The way he said it to me was, Stuart, what are you talking about? I'm the same as every other CEO that you've ever met, and the same as all. And so he was, in fact, fairly oblivious to his own communication style. This is true of all of us. We all have blind spots. And so let me tie now the mistrust and the miscommunications back to culture.
Yeah.
Michael, as you and I talked about when we first met, the problem with the golden rule, treating other people the way we want to be treated, is that whole rule really was defined 30 years ago. 30 years ago, we had a across the world religions thousands of years ago, but in a time when people didn't travel more than 30 miles in their entire lifespan.
Yes.
So there was very little, if any, opportunity to come across a group of people whose underlying values, beliefs, and assumptions were very different than their own. The golden rule breaks when the person who I would like to treat the way I would like to be, or I'm going to treat the way I'd like to be treated, actually has different expectations on how they want to be treated. And that happens, again, across all cultures based on their sense of community, their sense of individualism, the sense on how they, how important saving face is to them, things of that sort.
Right. No, I mean, that makes perfect sense. And so give me a few examples on where do you see some of these cultural differences? Are there any specific things that we can take into account?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the interesting things about someone's experience is no matter how much you've experience or accomplishment, success you've had, when you're dealing with another culture, you can't just extrapolate out. I'll give you a good story. I have this one client here in Silicon Valley, large semiconductor company, who had a customer in Sweden that they had been having lots of trust and miscommunications with.
Yep.
And so the director of engineering for the Swedish customer came over here to meet with my client. And my client wanted to take them out for a very nice dinner, show their appreciation for the business. And so they said to the director of engineering from the Swedish customer, we know in Sweden you eat a lot of seafood. How about sushi? Do you like sushi? And the gentleman from Sweden said, oh, yeah, sure, I love sushi. So they said, great. If you don't mind the drive, we'll go up to San Francisco. We know of a really great place, some of the best sushi we've ever had. And the Swedish guy said, sure. So they sit in Bay Area rush traffic, coming from where they were. Maybe it took them 90 minutes to get up there. They sit down and they go to order. And what is their Swedish customer, director of engineering, who apparently has had some global experience, what does he do? He orders chicken teriyaki. So my client's telling me the story. You see how difficult it is to deal with this guy? Can you imagine if he's ordering chicken teriyaki when we made special plans to go to the best sushi place? Can you imagine how difficult he must be in a normal business relationship? Well, right away I had some indication. So I contacted that restaurant and I got a chance to look at their menu. And what I noticed was something that brought first in up front to my mind was a Swedish, let's just say it's part of their national psyche. It's something called lagom, L-A-G-O-M. And lagom is in a sense the driving force behind the children's story, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's not too hot, not too cold. Lagom is everything in moderation. We don't want to go to an extreme. So when looking at the menu, what I saw was, for dinner, a large sushi combo and a small sushi combo. But there was no average sushi combo. So the Swedish director of engineering went through the following mental process, unbeknownst to his host. If he orders the large sushi complex, so large sushi combo, it'll seem like he's taking advantage of his host. If he orders a small one, it'll seem like he's not being appreciative enough. So we ordered the chicken teriyaki because it just seemed like the easier solution.
Right.
So here's a great example of, now let's transpose that into a business situation. Imagine that my client had gone out numerous times trying to get this customer interested in some extreme new technology or feature or functionality that was one of a kind and out on the extreme edges of performance. Would that excite the Swedish? No, he wants something in mainstream, something solid, something he can count on, something reliable. And so that's just one indication in Sweden where this notion of finding a middle ground can manifest itself in not just our personal lives, but in business.
Right. Right. Wow. Okay. So what actually do you do with these companies that you come in and help them? So obviously you can come in and try to investigate certain and extrapolate on certain situations, but how does this impact on a larger scale? I mean, at the end, I'm thinking of a company that I want to build later on in my life, and I know, okay, yes, I'm going to have an R&D team in Tel Aviv, and I'll probably have one in Ukraine as well, and I might want to have some marketing and some finance in Dublin and some work in China. How do I as a CEO can either use your resources or get these resources myself
Sure.
to
So I think the
be
first thing to
linked?
understand Michael, the first thing to understand as a CEO is to recognize your own biases, your own beliefs, your own limiting views in any situation. Because once you have a handle that you have a specific set of underlying assumptions about the way of interacting with other people, the easier it'll be to understand the plethora of other values and beliefs that other people have.
Right.
And once you've done that, you can then make an assessment of whether those reasons to rely on Ireland or the US or Eastern Europe or wherever, if you can bake into your plan to make sure that you and your team are properly educated as to how those people get work done. In fact, if you think about it, that's really the definition of culture.
But
It's
how do you?
how things get done around here.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I could go and do this research, and even my leadership team will be fine. But now the company is 1,000 people, and I have hundreds of people in every location. And we're working constantly on the same products. Is it reasonable to try and to teach 100 employees in Tel Aviv how the employees in Dublin are expecting them to communicate?
Absolutely, it is. And let's not forget that while there are certain underlying governing, if you will, at times, dynamics and values that are indicative of a culture, let's not make the mistake of throwing out individuality. Because at the
Right.
end of the day, we're all individuals.
Yep.
In one way or another, we have similar, we've often heard it said, we have, as a species, we have more similarities than we have differences.
Sure.
Well, that's certainly true on a country by country basis. So the point being is that the way people behave in a certain culture is, to a certain extent, reliable, repeatable, and predictable. So
Right.
yes, you can put a program together for 100, 500,000 people, where you get them all on the same page to understand how to transpose or modify the way they communicate in one country or with one group of people to another. Yes, absolutely. And I do that all the time.
So how intensive is this participation of yours within a company? Is this more of an advisory role, or is it a long-term engagement with a company where you have to really understand their culture?
Mhm. Well, I've done everything from, if you will, cultural triage, and sometimes after the fact, where all of a sudden what's hit the fan, and so
Yep.
now they want me to come in and try to make all good. And
Yep.
the problems with trust is, in many cases, if I come in too late, I can identify what went wrong, but you know, it,
Sure.
it's better to just get in up front, right?
Yep.
Uh, so, uh, so the best thing in the world is to be able to get everybody in that organization to understand, again, as individuals and as a team, what their priorities are in terms of how they
Right.
value and they believe things, and then understand how that differs from, and back to your question, are they dealing with one country? Are they dealing with 10 countries? Are they dealing with different functional organizations? All of these things can either simplify the engagement or can make the engagement quite involved. I've done everything from these triages where I go in after the fact to half-day executive one-on-ones to week-long trainings that include an entire range of countries and business processes. How do they negotiate one culture versus another culture?
Sure.
The other thing I want to add to the mix here, Michael, is so many people give a presentation in one country as they give it in the other and the next and the next,
Right.
not ever changing their slides. But what we know about cultural value differences is that one country might want a presentation that's much heavier on data and facts, while another might want presentation heavier on context and relationships and
Sure.
previous experiences. So
Yep.
I may have somebody who says, I don't really care about negotiating and the selling process, but I want to give the same level of presentation performance in one country as I do in all other countries.
Yeah. So now we're in the craziest of times, Corona times, and this is more relevant than ever, right? I mean, teams are distributed and are if even if before we would have more of a formal setting, even at a workplace where we would meet and be able to engage with each other and read each other's body languages, now it's becoming much harder. How much more difficult is it to sort of engage in these cultural differences, over Slack or email than it is in person? And how are you seeing this transition happening now with the coronavirus?
Yeah, so it's I was just reading a new book by Bill Davidow, the former the VC and former VP of marketing at Intel. His book is called The Autonomous Revolution. And in it, he talks about a scientific concept called phase shift, where the chemical or material properties may remain the same, but something happens to change the game and change the game in a way that you can't any longer take what you used to do before and apply it to a new situation. And the example he gives, of course, is everything we understand and we know about water tells us nothing about how to deal with ice. Everything we understand about communicating across cultures in a broad bandwidth channel of meeting face-to-face, communicating socially, getting together both inside the work environment as well as after hours, cannot be extrapolated out to how people are going to communicate solely on emails and on web conferences. We are going to miss so much of that communication. Do you know there are some cultures in the world where any of the real candor, any of the real sensitivity doesn't ever get discussed in the meeting room. It gets discussed one-on-one in person or after hours in the social engagement.
Right.
So it's really important to recognize first that we're dealing with an entirely different situation. Second, there's a fundamental dynamic of culture which is really troubling in a time like this. And that is the more stress and pressure that somebody is feeling, the more apt they are, regardless of what they've learned, to resort back to their own primal cultural values. And so getting them to be able to balance today's anxiety and today's stress with still keeping, if you will, a third eye open to cultural differences, this isn't something that's going to happen easily.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So what is one advice you would give to every company in the world right now as we're prepping for what could potentially be, a year-long engagement that's all virtual?
Sure. Whatever you may have thought about cultural differences in the past, the question becomes the following. Has there ever been a relationship that you've had with somebody where you trusted them more by an email exchange than you ever did by meeting them in person? Or is there anybody that you've ever trusted more with a phone call or a web call than you ever have by meeting them in person? And I think we all know the answer is no.
Yeah.
We trust people more in person. Take that away from us. And now ask yourself if there've ever been trust issues or alignment issues or miscommunications in the past, how you're going to manage those going forward in a world where our bandwidth of communication is so hindered. And the answer is really simple. It's through learning basic differences in the way people manage their time, prioritize, delegate, lead, make decisions. And it's attainable. It can be done, and it can. The great thing about this is these changes don't take a long time to implement or to see results. You can, and as difficult as the times are right now, you can ensure much greater success by adhering to some of this different values and beliefs.
I think it's fascinating the world that you live in, and the global context and the cultural differences. And I'm looking forward to also trying to practice a lot of that understanding and knowledge on my end later on, and also now as I'm engaging in the various activities. Stuart, before we leave, I need 3 words that describe you.
Passionate, humorous,
Yes.
and insightful.
I like it. Stuart, thank you very, very much. Stay healthy, stay safe.
You too, Michael. Take care. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.